As a 15-year-old, I did my first multi-day backpacking trip along the shore of Lake Superior with a summer camp based in Minnesota. I lived in Oklahoma at the time, and my idea of warm clothing was jeans and a cotton sweatshirt. After all, that's what I would wear on the coldest Oklahoma winter days. So when the camp said to pack warm clothing, that is what I brought. Our first night on trail, a massive storm blew in, snapping our tent poles, flooding our campsite, and soaking all of my clothes. I was shivering in my wet cotton clothing, which offered me little in the way of insulation while wet. The following days were cool, with wind blowing in from Lake Superior, and I could not get my cotton clothes to dry. Our group eventually decided to hitch a ride into town to a laundromat where we could use the electric dryers. Ever since that trip, I've been much more deliberate about bringing clothes that are appropriate for the conditions. With better clothing, I've been able to be comfortable on backpacking trips along the shore of Lake Superior in November, with temperatures never getting above the 40s and constant precipitation switching between rain, snow, sleet for days. I find myself agreeing with polar explorer Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who said, "There's no bad weather, only inappropriate clothing." This motto helps me to motivate to go outside and recreate, even when the weather seems rotten from my perspective on the couch. For example, a few years ago, during the much-hyped polar vortex, when temperatures were below zero for days, I bundled up in layers and spent a day snowshoeing in the woods. It was beautiful and fun, and I never felt cold. And it's not just that I'm tough. Back in town, I found the cold to be miserable. Dressing for a day spent in the office meant that when I did have to go outside to walk to another building or get in the car, I froze. The constant switching between climate-controlled indoor spaces and the harsh outdoors meant that I couldn't dress appropriately for both. But planning to spend an entire day outdoors in the cold meant I could layer appropriately, and my reward was a winter playground, almost entirely to myself, as most other people were huddled inside posting on Facebook about how much they hate winter or resorting to the treadmill to get exercise. The numerous options for outdoor clothing can seem overwhelming, but once you understand the goals of a clothing system and the characteristics of different fabrics and styles, you'll be able to pick the right clothing for the occasion. And with individual pieces that are versatile, you can mix and match to the conditions without having to own too many clothes. There are really only 3 goals to any clothing system: maintain a comfortable body temperature, manage moisture, and protect your skin. Sometimes you'll need to promote heat loss, and other times you'll need to prevent it. And your desire for one or the other can change from one moment to the next as you change your level of activity, or as the wind shifts or night falls. So having a clothing system that does both well is important. Let's look at my clothing system for summertime backpacking to see how a clothing system can meet its 3 goals: maintaining a comfortable body temperature, managing moisture, and protecting the skin. Once we understand that clothing system, we'll see how we can modify it to work in different climates and seasons. If I'm planning a backpacking trip in July along the north shore of Lake Superior, I'll need to be ready for hot and humid air. Temperatures can be in the 90s with relative humidity levels above 80%. And in the sun and the physical exertion of hiking with a heavy pack up steep hills, it's clear to see that my clothing is going to need to be able to efficiently dump heat, handle sweat, and protect me from sunburn. And probably mosquitoes as well. But if the wind shifts and starts to blow in off the lake, which with a summer surface temperature in the 50s acts like a huge air conditioner, I might need my clothing to also keep me warm in windy and cool conditions. And to make this even more challenging, that switch might happen rather abruptly. And if my clothes are wet with sweat, that 50-degree wind won't take long to make me uncomfortably cold. And to further add to the demands I'm putting on my clothing system, it could very likely rain during my trip. And this rain could be a hot rain while I'm backpacking, or a cold rain while I'm sitting around camp. It may seem like to have the right clothing for all these situations, I need to have a massive suitcase. But my clothing system is lightweight and compact enough to leave lots of room in a pack for equipment and food. We'll start with the base layers and work our way out. The most important aspect of a base layer is that it dries quickly. You don't want moisture trapped next to your skin. This means avoiding cotton, which takes a very long time to dry and will not keep you warm when it's wet. I choose lightweight nylon for my underwear and sports bra. I try to pick underwear that has flat seams that won't rub under my backpack. For long underwear, my preference is lightweight wool. Wool long underwear may be the last thing you visualize when you think of summer clothes, but I would never go camping without a lightweight set of long underwear, top and bottom. If the weather stays dry and warm, I may never wear it, but I love knowing that it's there in case I get cold or wet. It doesn't weigh much, and it hardly takes up any space. Modern wool isn't itchy, and the lightweight wool long underwear will dry relatively quickly. The other good option for long underwear is a synthetic, such as nylon, polyester, polypropylene, or rayon. Synthetics are generally less expensive and more durable than wool, and they dry more quickly. The downside to a synthetic base layer is that they tend to retain odors, and they melt if they come into contact with flame or extreme heat. There are some synthetic base layers that are treated to be antimicrobial, which can help with the odor problem. But wool is still less likely to be stinky over the long haul. And there is no way around the melting problem with synthetics. They are, after all, made from petroleum. If a spark from the fire lands on your synthetic layers, it will melt a hole before you have time to react. And if you somehow find yourself on fire while wearing synthetics, stopping, dropping, and rolling might not be enough to put yourself out. More than the odor problem, it was this last factor that convinced me to buy only wool base layers. I'd heard enough stories of campers who were wearing synthetics ending up with extended stays in hospital burn units after mishaps with camp stoves. It made me feel okay about the added expense of buying wool. You may also see base layers made from silk. Silk is a definite step above cotton, but it won't wick moisture away from your skin as well as either wool or synthetic, and it can get a bit stinky, and it's relatively fragile. I'd recommend wool or synthetic instead. Regardless of what material you choose, pick base layers that fit snugly. Their main job is to wick moisture away from your skin, and to do this well, they need to be in contact with your skin. Let's work our way out from the base layers to hiking pants and shirts. Their main job is to protect your skin and your base layer, if you're wearing one. My preference is a lightweight nylon. It's durable, it dries quickly, and it provides protection from the sun. I pick pants with flat seams on the waist so it won't rub under my backpack hip belt, and long sleeve vented shirts with enough room that I can use the full range of motion of my arms. I prefer light colors. They're cooler in the sun, less attractive to biting flies, and allow me to notice ticks more quickly. Lots of manufacturers make convertible pants that zip off into shorts. I've never been a fan of these. I much prefer to stay with long pants and long sleeves, even in hot weather. As long as my clothes are a lightweight nylon and are loose-fitting, they can keep me cool. They reduce the radiation I get from the sun and act like a chimney to help convect air past my skin. Hot air rises out of the top, drawing cooler air in through the bottom. The nylon clothes also evaporate moisture when they're wet, cooling me even further. If I'm somewhere with access to a body of water and I need to cool down, I'll jump in fully clothed. My nylon clothes will dry relatively quickly, cooling me down in the process and keeping the sun's radiation off me. Much better, in my opinion, than wearing shorts and a tank top. And my skin will be less scratched, scraped, and bug-bitten by the end of the trip as well. In anticipation of wind or rain, you'll want to bring a shell layer. Even if I'm not expecting rain, I never go camping without a shell layer. I bring a lightweight rain jacket and rain pants made out of waterproof, breathable fabric like Gore-Tex. I choose a jacket that is long enough to go over my butt and roomy enough to fit over multiple layers. Given the fact that a lot of women's clothing is cut to be more cute, this means that I usually end up buying a men's jacket and getting one that is a size or two larger than what would be fashionable. I choose a bright color for my raincoat. This helps me be more visible if I were to get lost or injured, and makes me less likely to look like a deer to a hunter. There is a dizzying array of options for rain gear that claims to be waterproof and breathable. The more expensive option uses laminates, and the less expensive options use coatings. You can see the coating on the inside of the jacket. Jackets made with a waterproof, breathable coating can cost as little as 1/10 as much as a jacket made with the highest tech versions of the laminates. But the top of the line laminates do have better breathability. And that might be important to you if you're going to be exercising very hard in a cold rain. But if your budget allows only for an inexpensive coated waterproof breathable shell, don't worry. It'll work to keep the rain off, especially if you follow the manufacturer's instructions for maintaining it. The less expensive jacket might just feel a little more clammy inside than the top of the line laminate. And all waterproof breathable rain gear, even the most expensive kind, will lose its performance as it ages and comes into contact with dirt, oils, and bug repellents. And finally, just because it's raining doesn't mean you automatically want to put on your shell layer. If it's a hot day and I'm backpacking in the rain, I likely won't put on my rain gear. It would make me so hot that whatever water I kept off from the rain, I would likely replace with sweat. Instead, I'll just make sure that I'm wearing only my quick-dry hiking pants and shirt. Because it's a hot day, it's okay if my nylon gets wet. If, when I stop hiking, I start to get chilly, I'll throw on my rain gear then. The rain gear will cut down on heat loss from both radiation and convection, and allow my body heat to dry the hiking pants and shirt, pushing the vapor out through the breathable membrane. So we've talked about the base layer that helps manage moisture, the hiking pants and shirt that help protect your skin, and the shell layer that protects you from the rain and wind. Those aspects will be largely the same, regardless of the climate and weather conditions, with a few exceptions, which we'll discuss in a moment. The main thing that will change from one trip to the next will be how much insulation you bring. On my summer backpack trips on the North Shore of Lake Superior, I'll bring a lightweight sweater, a lightweight puffy vest, and a lightweight puffy jacket and a thin fleece hat. My sweater is a blend of wool and a synthetic material, and the puffy vest and jacket are synthetic. Puffy layers work by trapping air inside the fibers of the insulation, much like the fiberglass or cellulose insulation in the walls of a house. My body heats the trapped air, and then that warm air insulates me from the outside air temperatures. For puffy layers to be effective, they need to be not too loosely fitting. You don't want air to be able to convect between your base layer and your puffy like it would up a chimney. They also need to be fully lofted or expanded. This is where the importance of having a loose-fitting shell becomes apparent. A rain jacket that is too small to fit over a puffy without compressing it will reduce the insulative properties of the puffy fibers. Puffy layers are available with either synthetic insulation or down. Down is more expensive, but it has the best warmth-to-weight ratio, the best ability to compress, and will last for many more years, assuming you take good care of it. The downside to down, other than the expense, is that it loses its loft when it gets wet. Synthetics, on the other hand, will still keep you warm even when they're soaked. For that reason, in seasons and places where rain is likely, I bring my synthetic puffies. A variety of manufacturers are making a hydrophobic down, which they claim is water resistant. Initial reviews and testing seem to confirm that the water repellent treatment on the down works, but this treatment is relatively new, so it's hard to say for sure how many years it will last. If you're in the market for new puffy layers and money isn't an issue, I'd say hydrophobic down would be worth trying. There's only a few other things to add to my clothing system: wool hiking socks, a sun hat, 2 bandanas, and a t-shirt and shorts for sleeping. I like a cotton t-shirt for sleeping, as I just love the feel of cotton and know that in my tent I can keep it dry. I choose quick-dry nylon shorts so they can double as swimwear if needed. The cotton bandanas help provide sun protection for my neck, and when wet, can help keep me cool. The sun hat not only keeps the sun out of my face, but also makes me look a little more presentable after a day or two of not showering. And if the bugs are bad, I can spray repellent on the bandana and hat rather than on my face and neck. Through mixing and matching the layers, I can be comfortable in a range of temperatures and activities with only these few items of well-selected clothes. They're compact, lightweight, and easy to fit into a pack, They're easy to clean, quick drying, and odor resistant. And most importantly, they help me manage moisture, maintain a good body temperature, and protect my skin. With a few small tweaks, this clothing system can work for more challenging climates and conditions. If I were headed into the hot desert, I might bring a cotton long-sleeve sun shirt. Whereas in non-desert conditions, I would want to avoid cotton's penchant for staying wet. In the desert, this could be a plus. I could dunk it in water, put it back on, and then enjoy the extended time of evaporative cooling. I might also bring a lightweight yet durable backpacking umbrella for staying out of the sun. I'd leave the rain pants at home, but still bring the raincoat, mostly for warmth after the sun goes down. It can get downright cold in the desert at night. The raincoat over my puffy layer will protect me from convective heat loss if it's windy. I'll also add ankle gaiters to keep sand and gravel out of my boots. If I were headed into the tropical rainforest, I would for sure bring a backpacking umbrella, and I might substitute a poncho for the raincoat. Even raincoats that are advertised as being breathable will be stuffy to wear in a hot, muggy climate. I'd rather have the convective cooling of the airflow I could get under an umbrella or a poncho. And the poncho could double as a tarp when I stop for lunch. I'll still bring the puffy layers, even though the chances of me needing to wear them would be slim, but I can use them as a substitute for a pillow, so they're not extra weight. And if I do get chilled, I'll be glad I have them. If I were headed into places with lots of ticks, I would consider buying hiking pants, a hiking shirt, and gaiters that are treated with a bug-repellent permethrin. If I expected lots of mosquitoes, black flies, or no-see-ums, I'd throw in a head net or a bug shirt with a built-in head net. I might even bring some lightweight gloves and a thin neck gaiter so I can protect even more of my skin from the biting insects. If I were headed out in the snow, I would need to add insulation. I'd substitute a thicker puffy vest and a thicker puffy coat and a pair of heavyweight long underwear tops and bottoms, some wrist warmers, glove liners, mittens, a neck gaiter, and some winter boots, and full-length gaiters. Don't let all the extra pieces intimidate you. At its core, it's the same system. You've got the base layer, the insulation, and the outer shell. All I've done in the winter is add more insulation. Ironically, your biggest challenge for cold weather clothing systems will be keeping yourself from sweating. Our bodies generate massive amounts of heat when we start to exercise. So if you're lounging around camp in the morning, completely comfortable in all your puffy layers, and then you start to snowshoe or ski, it won't be long before you're starting to overheat. You'll definitely don't want to soak your layers with sweat. When you stop moving again, you'll get cold quickly if you're damp. So make sure to shed layers before exercising. I usually leave my biggest puffy jacket near the very top of my pack, so when I do stop for a snack break, I can quickly throw it over the top to keep me warm. I then shed it again just before getting moving. I also pick warm clothes and shells that have zippers so that I can vent my chest and neck and armpits. Perhaps the one thing that can ruin an outdoor trip faster than inappropriate clothing is inappropriate footwear. And sadly, on that first backpacking trip of mine, the one when I was 15 and wearing soaking wet cotton jeans and a sweatshirt on the North Shore of Lake Superior, I also had ill-fitting boots. My mom, well-meaning as she was, had offered me her old hiking boots from when she was in college and had studied abroad in Peru. They were so retro, with full-grain leather outers and sheepskin lining and red laces, straight out of the 60s. I thought they were so cool, and I loved the romance of hiking in the same boots my mom had worn to scale Machu Picchu. But as cool looking as they were, the leather was old and stiff, and they didn't fit me very well. I soon had hot spots that turned into blisters, that broke into open wounds, that wore down until I could see the sheaths on the flexor tendons on the top of my big toes. When the trip was over and my mom saw the scars on my feet, she felt so badly that she took me to the local outdoor store and told me I could pick out any boots I wanted, no matter the price. So I, of course, started out by trying on the most expensive pair. But they weren't very comfortable. With the memory of the pain of the ill-fitting boots still fresh in my mind, I tried on more pairs until I found one that fit my foot. No binding, rubbing, or pressure points. It wasn't the style I thought was the most attractive, and they weren't nearly as expensive as I would have liked, given the carte blanche from my mom. But the lesson I learned was that footwear has to be comfortable, and it has to fit your foot well. As tempting as it might be to save some money by ordering boots online, it's worth going to an outdoor store with employees who are trained in fitting boots. They'll measure your foot, not just the length and width, but also the volume, and they'll suggest boots that will work. They'll also help you fine-tune the fit if needed by adding insoles or changing the lacing pattern. Try to go footwear shopping near the end of the day when your feet are a bit more swollen than they are in the morning. And bring the socks you'll be wearing hiking, as well as any orthotic inserts you might use. Most stores will have some sort of artificial terrain where you can see how the boot responds to walking up and down inclines. When trying on boots, don't ignore a pressure point or some movement of your foot against the boot as you walk. It may feel fine in the store, but repeated over the course of hours, any rubbing or pressing can do serious damage. In addition to getting footwear that fits well, it's important to pick the right shoe or boot for the occasion. If you're going to be doing a variety of different types of outdoor activities, you'll likely need a variety of different shoes. Shoes exist on a continuum between support and flexibility, and where they fall on that continuum determines their purpose. Boots designed for backpacking with a heavy pack on rugged terrain will give you much more support than boots designed for light hiking or shoes meant for day hikes. But that support will come with more stiffness, more weight, and likely more time needed to break them in. But you'll be happy to have that support when you're carrying a heavy load over sharp rocks or down steep inclines. I once ended up doing a multi-day backpacking trip over a pass in the Olympic Mountains when I had been planning instead to be on only a series of short day hikes. Because I'd been expecting to have only a very light pack and to be walking on pretty flat trails, I'd packed only my lightweight walking shoes. They had a very soft midsole and they lacked a rigid shank like you'd find in a hiking boot. So every time I'd step down onto a sharp rock with the full weight of my pack pressing me down, my shoe and my foot inside it would flex around the rock. Also, the shoes didn't have a heel brake like a hiking boot would to help keep me from sliding downhill. And they didn't cinch around my ankle to help keep my foot from sliding forward and ramming my toes into the front of my shoe. When we'd stop for snack breaks, I'd remove my shoes, rub my aching feet, and then soak them in the cold mountain stream. But by the end of the third day, I could tell that I was going to lose my toenails. Our feet are just not ready to take that kind of beating. It's for trips like that where you'll want a stiff backpacking boot rather than a light hiker or a walking shoe. Besides choosing between a backpacking boot, a light hiker, or a walking shoe, you'll also get to choose between materials. Full grain leathers will take longer to break in than either split grain or synthetics, but they will last longer and be more waterproof. There are some lightweight hiking boots that claim to be waterproof because of a membrane, like Gore-Tex, inside. But some people feel that they make their feet more sweaty and that once the boots do get wet inside, they take a long time to dry. If you're really wanting good water resistance for the long haul, it's hard to beat full grain leather, especially if you add a Gore-Tex gaiter over the top. Whatever footwear you buy, make sure you spend lots of time breaking them in before embarking on any extended trips. And remember, the more heavy-duty your boots, the more time they'll take to break in. If you're going on a multi-day trip, consider bringing a second pair of shoes to wear around camp. No matter how well broken in your hiking boots are, it will feel heavenly to trade them out for some lightweight tennis shoes or Crocs at the end of the day. With appropriate footwear and appropriate clothing, you'll be well on your way to being comfortable and safe in the outdoors. And then the weather that once seemed miserable will no longer keep you cooped up inside. Remember, much of this can be purchased secondhand and should last for years. And you don't necessarily need to spend the money on an outdoor-specific brand. Nylon is nylon and wool is wool. You might already have a lot of suitable clothing in your closet.